Israel Keyes didn't fit the profile. He didn't have a signature. He didn't follow a pattern. And that's what made him terrifying. This is the true story of one of America's most calculated killers, and how he almost got away with everything. From the outside, Israel Keyes looked like any other hard-working American. A military veteran, a contractor, a father. He lived in Anchorage, Alaska, and ran a small construction business. He was quiet, polite, even well-liked by clients. He smiled. He blended in. And for over a decade, that's exactly what he wanted. Because beneath that calm, everyday exterior was a man living a double life, one that no one around him suspected. Israel Keyes was a serial killer. But not just any serial killer. He was methodical, meticulous, and terrifyingly patient. Keyes didn't kill for attention. He didn't leave calling cards. He didn't want fame. In fact, his biggest goal was to go unnoticed. And for years, he succeeded. Born in Utah in 1978, Israel Keyes grew up in a large, extremely isolated and deeply religious family. His parents were strict fundamentalists who moved the family to rural Washington state, then later to remote areas of Oregon. Keyes was homeschooled. He had little interaction with outsiders. By his early teens, he had already begun fantasizing about violence. He later admitted that by age 14, he knew he would kill. He claimed he committed his first assault on an unknown victim in the late 1990s, though the details remain vague. He joined the U.S. Army in 1998 and served until 2001, stationed in Egypt and Fort Lewis in Washington. Fellow soldiers described him as odd, but nothing more. After his discharge, Keyes lived in several states, Washington, New York, Texas, before settling in Alaska. He had a long-term girlfriend and a daughter. He paid his taxes. He coached his child's softball games. No one knew the man hiding behind the mask. What made Keyes different from most serial killers was his complete lack of pattern. He chose victims randomly. He traveled thousands of miles to commit murders. He avoided victims that could be linked. He buried kill kits, plastic buckets filled with weapons, rope, and cleaning supplies, in remote locations years before using them, and he never killed close to home. This level of planning meant that, for a long time, Keyes flew under every radar. No connected cases. No linked DNA. No warnings. Until 2012. That year, 18-year-old Samantha Koenig disappeared from her job at a coffee stand in Anchorage. Security footage showed a masked man abducting her at gunpoint. The city was stunned. Her family and friends launched a desperate search. And then, 10 days later, Samantha's boyfriend received a text from her phone. A ransom demand. A photo of Samantha holding a newspaper. But Samantha was already dead. Keyes had killed her the same night he abducted her. The photo was staged days later using makeup and props to make it seem like she was still alive. He then dismembered her body and dumped it into a frozen lake. He used her debit card to withdraw money as he traveled across several states, New Mexico, Texas, Arizona, trying to stay ahead of law enforcement. But this time, he made a mistake. Surveillance cameras captured images of his rental car. The FBI tracked his movements. On March 13, 2012, Israel Keyes was arrested in Lufkin, Texas. Inside his car, police found Samantha's phone, her debit card, and the mask he wore during the abduction. At first, Keyes stayed silent. Then he started talking. But what he revealed went far beyond the murder of Samantha Koenig. He told investigators they'd never be able to connect him to his other crimes. that he'd traveled specifically to avoid patterns, that he used cash only, that he destroyed all evidence. He bragged about burying kill kits in Vermont, New York, and Washington State years in advance. And then he said the chilling words, "There's more, a lot more." He described killing a couple in Vermont, Bill and Lorraine Currier, in 2011. He had flown to Chicago, rented a car, and driven over 1,000 miles just to commit the murders. He chose them at random. He broke into their home, abducted them, and murdered them hours later. Then he vanished without a trace. The Currier case had gone cold. No suspect, no motive, until Keyes confessed. But even then, he refused to give full details. He teased the FBI. He offered information in exchange for anonymity. He didn't want media attention. He didn't want his daughter to know what he had done. He claimed he had killed at least 11 people, possibly more. But before investigators could uncover the full truth, Israel Keyes took it with him. In December 2012, while awaiting trial, Keyes committed suicide in his jail cell. He left behind a series of disturbing drawings made with his own blood, and a note, rambling, cryptic, filled with vague references to death, but no clear confessions. To this day, the true number of his victims remains unknown. Israel Keyes was not like other killers. He was worse. To understand how Israel Keyes became one of the most elusive serial killers in American history, you have to understand his methods. Unlike most murderers who act on impulse or obsession, Keyes operated like a predator from a different world, one where patience, anonymity, and logistics were the true weapons. He didn't kill where he lived. He didn't stalk his victims. He didn't leave forensic evidence. What he did instead was terrifying in its simplicity. He prepared, years in advance. Keyes would fly or drive across the country and bury what he called kill kits, 5-gallon Home Depot buckets filled with weapons, ammunition, duct tape, cash, zip ties, and bottles of Drano, which he used to accelerate decomposition. He buried them in places he had no personal ties to: quiet woods, remote parks, fields off of forgotten highways. And then he'd wait, sometimes for years. When the moment came, he'd travel to one of his hidden kits, retrieve the materials, and begin looking for a victim. He picked people randomly: hitchhikers, campers, people outside late at night. He avoided victims that might generate immediate media attention. No kids, no major celebrities, just people who wouldn't be noticed right away. He called it methodical mayhem. Investigators were stunned when they learned about the kill kits. The level of foresight was something rarely seen, even among the most organized serial killers. He had kits stashed in New York, Vermont, Washington, and potentially in over a dozen other states. Most of them were never recovered. His goal wasn't just to kill. It was to avoid detection entirely. And that's exactly why no one knew his name until 2012. Keyes planned every detail of his crimes down to the hour. He paid for everything in cash. He turned off his cell phone. He never used credit cards. He traveled under the radar, renting cars from different companies, switching license plates. He even removed the battery from his phone while on the move. That level of calculation made him nearly invisible. His confession regarding the Currier murders in Vermont revealed just how deeply he thought through every step. He flew from Alaska to Chicago, rented a car, and drove 1,000 miles to Essex, Vermont. Along the way, he stopped to retrieve a kill kit he had buried years earlier. He didn't know Bill and Lorraine Currier. He simply chose their house because it had no attached garage and no dogs. He broke in during the night, took them both, brought them to an abandoned farmhouse. Then he killed them and left no trace. The courier case had baffled local police for a year. Until Keyes admitted to it, they had no leads. It was a complete ghost crime, and according to Keyes, there were more. In hours of recorded FBI interviews, much of which is still sealed, Keyes admitted to killing at least 11 people. He hinted at crimes stretching from Washington to New York, and as far south as Texas. He said he preferred strangulation over firearms because it gave him more control. He admitted to raping some of his victims, but he refused to give names, dates, or locations. He wanted to be in control, even in custody. Keyes played mind games with investigators. He'd give just enough information to keep them interested, then shut down. He offered to provide more details if his name was kept out of the media. He didn't want his daughter to grow up Googling what he had done, but the FBI suspected there was another reason. He enjoyed the power. In one interview, he described his crimes as addictive. He said, "It was like going to the casino." He liked the risk, the rush, the ability to plan something, execute it, and walk away without anyone knowing. In Alaska, no one knew what he was. His construction clients described him as dependable. His neighbors saw him jogging, laughing with his daughter, fixing up his house. To them, he was just another working dad. But between projects and school pickups, he was traveling across the country, digging up kill kits and ending lives. That duality is what still horrifies investigators. Even after his death, agents continued trying to piece together his movements. They combed through airline records, rental cars, gas receipts. They released details to the public in hopes of matching missing persons to his routes. Some cases were reopened. Bodies were re-examined. But Israel Keyes had been too careful. The maps he used were burned. The kits, most still buried. And the stories, only partially told. What Israel Keyes left behind wasn't just a trail of victims. He left a blueprint for how to kill without being caught. And that's what makes him one of the most dangerous minds the FBI has ever encountered. When Israel Keyes was finally arrested in March 2012, the man sitting in the interrogation room didn't look like a monster. He was clean-cut, polite, and disarmingly calm. But beneath that exterior, the mask was beginning to slip. What the FBI would soon discover wasn't just a killer, but a psychological chess player, one who thrived on control even behind bars. Keyes initially denied everything. He requested an attorney. He seemed more annoyed than afraid. But as the evidence mounted, Samantha Koenig's ATM card, her phone, the zip ties and mask in his car, he shifted strategies. He decided to talk. On his terms. His interviews with investigators spanned over 40 hours across several months. These sessions were tense, uncomfortable, and often eerily quiet. Keyes would speak in calm tones, then fall silent for minutes. He smiled. He joked. He corrected agents when they got details wrong, not angrily, but smugly. It wasn't a confession. It was a performance. He told the FBI he had studied other serial killers, Bundy, BTK, but he intentionally did things differently. He avoided patterns. He traveled long distances. He targeted random strangers. He buried evidence, literally, and paid only in cash. His goal, he said, was to be a ghost, and he almost succeeded. But what disturbed agents most wasn't just his methods. It was how casually he described them. He talked about the courier murders like he was recounting a hunting trip. He explained how he waited for hours in their garage, how he abducted them calmly, how he returned the kill kit to the ground when it was over. In other moments, he went silent. When asked about other victims, he would smirk. "You don't have a clue," he said once. "You've barely scratched the surface." That's when the FBI realized Keyes wasn't confessing. He was controlling the narrative, and he had no intention of giving up everything. Instead, he dangled pieces. He offered to trade information for a public blackout of his name and case. He wanted to ensure his daughter would never see him in the news. He demanded executions over trials, and he promised to reveal the names of his other victims, but only if his terms were met. It put investigators in a bind. They were desperate for answers, but they knew he was manipulating them. He was leveraging the lives of his victims as bargaining chips. Still, the FBI pushed forward. They tracked his known travel routes, cross-referenced cold cases, looked into reports of missing persons in areas where his phone had pinged. They found disturbing consistencies: women missing near his campgrounds, couples gone from parks he had visited, a pattern of darkness stretching coast to coast. But Keyes gave them nothing definitive. He refused to name names. He would only talk in circles. "It's not like the movies," he told agents. "Sometimes people just disappear." His demeanor remained cold and clinical, except when he spoke about Samantha Koenig. In those moments, there were flashes of regret, or something close to it. He admitted she hadn't been part of the plan. He had gone out that night looking for a house to rob, but then he saw her alone in the kiosk, and he changed course. Even then, it wasn't rage or impulse. It was opportunity. Keyes kept Samantha alive for hours. He returned to his home, where his girlfriend and daughter slept, and left Samantha tied in a shed outside. The next morning, he made breakfast for his family, took his daughter to school, and then returned to kill. That ability to shift between normal life and horrific violence stunned agents. They pressed him for other names, other details. He finally admitted to burying kill kits in at least 9 states. He hinted at murders in Washington, New York, and even Mexico. But every time they asked for proof, he pulled back. Then, in December 2012, everything stopped. While being held in Anchorage Correctional Complex, Keyes used a disposable razor to cut his wrists and hang himself with a bedsheet. He left behind 12 pages of blood-soaked drawings and a suicide note. The letter was poetic, cryptic, and offered no names, no answers, just silence. The FBI was devastated. With his death, the investigation lost its only source of information. And worse, families across the country lost the chance to ever know what happened to their loved ones. To this day, Israel Keyes is suspected in as many as 11 murders. Some believe the real number could be much higher. His face rarely appears in the media. There are few photos, few videos. That's how he wanted it. He wasn't looking for fame, just the perfect crime. After Israel Keyes took his own life in December 2012, the investigation didn't end. It became a race against time to identify the victims he hinted at but never named. The FBI now faced a staggering task: to retrace the movements of a man who had deliberately erased his own footprints. Keyes had confessed to killing at least 11 people, but provided only details about 3: Samantha Koenig in Alaska, and Bill and Lorraine Currier in Vermont. The others? He called them projects. No names, no timelines, no locations. So investigators turned to what they had: his travel records. They began building what became known as the Keys timeline. Using GPS data, credit card transactions, rental car receipts, hotel stays, and cell phone tower pings, the FBI created a map of everywhere Keys had traveled over the years. It was a digital spider web spanning the entire United States. From Washington to Texas, Oregon to New York, Keys had driven or flown to dozens of states between 2001 and 2012. He often took long road trips, sometimes thousands of miles, with no clear destination. He would disappear for days. Sometimes he told his family he was going to work. Sometimes he said nothing at all. In almost every state he visited, there were unsolved murders, disappearances, cold cases that suddenly looked familiar. Keys had admitted to staying at campgrounds and remote motels. He avoided cities when possible. He never used his own name. He bought supplies with cash and used rented cars. That made it nearly impossible to track exactly where he went, especially in areas with no surveillance or digital infrastructure. Still, the FBI identified several key trips that raised red flags. July 2004, Utah and Nevada. Keys traveled by car through remote parts of these states. Several young women had gone missing during that time. October 2006, New Hampshire and Vermont. This trip aligns with the time he claimed to have scoped out a house in the woods. No victim was confirmed, but a kill kit was later discovered nearby. April 2009, California to Washington. Multiple missing persons cases match this window, including hikers and transient travelers. Keys told agents he preferred victims that would take longer to be noticed, people without strong ties, without routines, often isolated. This preference made connecting specific names to him even harder. In one interview, he said, "You're looking for names, but they're gone. That's the point." The FBI eventually made the decision to release portions of the timeline to the public. They hoped someone, somewhere, might recognize a pattern or connect the dots. And tips did come in. Dozens. Then hundreds. But none led to a confirmed match. What frustrated agents the most was that Keys had clearly kept records. He mentioned having maps, journals, even trophies. But after his arrest, he destroyed or hid most of them. He burned documents, dismantled digital drives. One agent said, "It was like chasing smoke. You could see where he'd been, but never what he'd done." The FBI believed that Keys had kill kits still buried across the U.S. As of today, only 2 have been recovered. One in Anchorage. One in New York. Others are likely still hidden in national parks, woods, or under layers of dirt and snow. Each kit is a silent time bomb, a piece of evidence waiting to be found. The challenge now wasn't just forensic. It was emotional. For every missing person case in a state Keys had visited, there was a grieving family. Parents, siblings, children, all wondering if their loved one was one of Keys' unknown victims. And that's what haunts this case the most, the not knowing. Keys left behind a map with no labels, a story with no ending. And for the FBI, that means the search continues, one cold case at a time. There's a chance that some of his victims will never be found, that some were buried so deep or dumped in waters so remote that time has erased every clue. But there's also hope. Hope that a new forensic tool, a break in DNA technology, a tip from someone who saw something strange in 2007 or 2009, hope that someone, somewhere, will finally connect that last missing piece. Because even in death, Israel Keys left behind questions that only his victims can answer. And until those names are known, his crimes aren't finished. In the aftermath of Israel Keyes' death, one thing became clear: the silence he left behind was intentional. He had orchestrated his own vanishing act from the inside out, and that silence, strategic, chilling, became his legacy. Unlike other serial killers who crave attention, Keyes wanted to vanish. He didn't write manifestos. He didn't enjoy media coverage. In fact, the only reason the world knows his name is because the FBI made a decision to release limited information to the public in the hope of identifying his victims. To this day, the Bureau remains cautious with the full details. Much of the recorded interviews remain sealed. Some evidence has never been publicly revealed. Why? Because Keyes left behind a blueprint for others, a calculated, nearly perfect model for killing in silence. The true horror of Israel Keyes is not just the lives he took, but the way he proved it was possible to exist, kill, and disappear within the cracks of modern society. His case shattered the myth that serial killers are easy to spot, or that patterns always emerge. He didn't have a type. He didn't have a method. And that's why he wasn't caught for over a decade. His story continues to affect the world of law enforcement, changing how missing persons cases are evaluated and how data is tracked across state lines. The FBI and local police departments have improved systems for linking crimes with no apparent motive. Behavioral analysts now use the Keyes case in training as a warning about how dangerous a highly intelligent, antisocial offender can be. But for the public, the emotional legacy runs deeper. For the families of the unidentified victims, every new lead offers both hope and heartbreak. Keyes left behind a landscape of pain, dozens of families who still don't know if their missing loved one fell into his path. True crime communities have kept the conversation going. Podcasts, documentaries, and YouTube creators have explored his story in detail, often uncovering new theories or lesser-known connections. But even the most dedicated sleuths are limited by the same thing that stumped the FBI. Keyes was too careful. In a world that thrives on exposure, he was a ghost. He left behind no digital trace, no photos with victims, no public boasting, just a string of gaps in time, and lives erased. And yet, in a cruel paradox, the only reason his name survived was because of how completely he disappeared. His silence became louder than any confession. It became a challenge, a provocation. In Anchorage, the community that once knew him as a neighbor now remembers him with dread. His house has long since been sold. His name is rarely spoken aloud. But for those who lived through the search for Samantha Koenig, the memory remains vivid. For her family, the pain has never left. Samantha's death may have exposed the monster hiding behind Keyes' smile, but it also marked the end of any further accountability. With his suicide, he robbed the world of answers, and robbed his victims' families of justice. Still, some continue the search. The FBI's Israel Keyes Task Force remains active. Cold cases from New York to Washington are still being reviewed. Tips are still accepted. DNA databases continue to expand. And while Keyes himself is gone, the shadows of his crimes have not lifted. Because ultimately, this story isn't just about one man. It's about the darkness that can exist unnoticed, the dangers of assumption, the price of silence. Israel Keyes wanted to be forgotten, but we remember him for the wrong reasons, not as a man, but as a warning that some killers don't want attention. They want the void, and sometimes that's even worse.